တိုင်းပြည်2020စီစဉ်ကနေပြန်လည်ကြိုဆိုလိုက်ပါတယ်ဒီချိန်မှာတော့ gender equality လို့ခေါ်တဲ့ကြားမတန်းတူညီမျှမှုအရေးကိုဆွေးနွေးတင်ပြသွားမှာဖြစ်ပါတယ်ဆိုတော့ဒီချိန်ဆွေးနွေးတင်ပြဖို့အတွက်ပြည်ပပညာရှင်တို့ကိုကျွန်တော်တို့ဖိတ်ခေါ်ထားပါတယ် online ကနေတဆင့်ဆွေးနွေးတင်ပြသွားမှာဖြစ်ပါတယ်ဆိုတော့ဒီပညာရှင်ကတော့မြန်မာနိုင်ငံအကြောင်းကိုလည်းတည်ကျွမ်းနားလည်သူဖြစ်တဲ့ Australia နိုင်ငံ New South Wales တက္ကသိုလ်ကပါမောက္ခ Christine Forster ဖြစ်ပါတယ်သူက Associate Dean International အဖြစ်နဲ့ဒီတက္ကသိုလ်ရဲ့နိုင်ငံတကာဆက်ဆံရေးကိစ္စရပ်တွေကိုမဟာဌာနမှူးတွဲဘက်မဟာဌာနမှူးအဖြစ်နဲ့ဆောင်ရွက်နေတဲ့ပုဂ္ဂိုလ်လည်းဖြစ်ပါတယ်ခင်ဗျာ Hello Professor Christine yeah so I'd like to start with the question why is gender equality important?
Gender equality is really important for a range of reasons. It's important at the individual level for women themselves because women should have access to all the same opportunities that men have and should be able to enjoy their rights in the same way that men have. So on an individual level, of course, it's important, but it's also very important for the whole community. There's an enormous amount of research that shows that if women have equal access to education, employment, health, and in other areas of their lives, then they contribute much more to the community, and the community is better off economically, socially, politically, and in so many different ways. So when you give women the opportunity to be equal, then the whole community in the society is benefiting from this. It's like not utilising half of your talent pool really isn't a sensible way for development.
Yeah, thank you. You know, as you know, Myanmar is trying to be a full-fledged federal country. So we want to know how federalism affects the gender equality. What's the role of gender equality in federal countries?
So of course there are advantages and disadvantages in any governance system, whether it's a federal system or a unitary system, and there are challenges that have nothing to do with the federal system or the unitary system, such as traditional practices, the progressiveness of the government, the level of wealth that a country might have. But there are certain opportunities in federal systems that make it create opportunities for advancing gender equality. I'll just give you some of those. First of all, federal systems offer the opportunity to forum shop. And by forum shop, I mean that you can target receptive units for particular gender equality measures. So just to give an example, gender quotas is often a very controversial topic, and it may be very difficult to get a central government to introduce them. But you might have one state or region that's very progressive and is prepared to trial gender quotas. And then once they've implemented it and everybody, the community, has seen that this is very successful, then other states and regions might adopt them as well. It's also, in a federal system, a lot more opportunities to innovate and to try out and pilot projects and ideas, and there's lots of examples of this, and so there are opportunities in federal systems to innovate and for there to be policy transfer when something works well.
We are, as you know, we are a transitional country, I mean, in many aspects, so we want to know, what is the nature of, the transitional countries in the gender equality, in terms of gender equality?
Transitional countries have an enormous opportunity to further gender equality, one that you can really make the most of. This is because during the process of transition, a country is almost certainly going to be, first of all, modifying their constitution. And in the process of modifying a constitution, there are lots of opportunities to introduce gender equality measures during that process. For example, it's a great opportunity to have some very strong equality and non-discrimination provisions in the Bill of Rights to guarantee equality in all areas of women's lives, such as employment, education, etc. It's also the opportunity to introduce gender quotas. And also very important, this is the time in which you're going to work out the allocation of competencies and you're going to work out fiscal federalism. And you can really introduce some measures that ensure that there's adequate money for services for women in the different states and regions, that states and regions have the right kinds of powers to enable them to enact legislation, perhaps, if that's part of the constitutional arrangement, or at least to implement policies that are going to advantage women. So I think also very important is that women's voices are heard during that transition, and if you're going through any kind of peace process, women's voices are absolutely central to make sure that these things are put in place.
We are, the post-conflict or still conflict society, as we have over 70 years of the armed conflict, internal armed conflict inside the Myanmar. We have one of the longest running the civil wars or the internal armed conflicts in the world. Maybe it's not something we should be proud of, but that is what we are. So I want to know, so what would be the role of gender equality on the development of the conflict or the post-conflict societies like Myanmar?
Every conflict is different, and I think everybody is impacted by conflict, every single citizen and resident of a country. But I think it's also true that women are disproportionately affected in certain ways during conflict and often post-conflict. They're often victims of gender-based violence. They often bear the burden of managing home and family and sometimes community in the absence of men if they're off fighting, and then they have to manage the situation when men come back after fighting. Services may be poor and after conflict, and women again, they have to collect the wood and the water and deal with the poor delivery of services and poverty and insecurity. Again, I would say that because of this, it's so important that women are part of that peace process and part of making decisions about a post-conflict society, what it's going to look like.
You are familiar with Myanmar situation, I mean the Myanmar context, and you have visited Myanmar several times to conduct the trainings here. So I want to know where we are. What is the situation of gender equality in Myanmar, and in a related question, what is the situation of federalism in Myanmar? So actually there are two questions. In
terms of the first question, actually local women and local organisations are likely to be better placed than me to talk about gender equality in Myanmar, but I can refer to certain statistics and facts that I know about Myanmar. The Global Gender Gap is a project that measures the gender gap in all countries, or at least in 153 countries, on pillars of economic participation and opportunity, educational attainment, health and survival, and political empowerment. And Myanmar in 2020 is ranked 114th out of 153 countries. So it's got a long way to go. It has 11% in the National Parliament, 9.5% women representation in state and region parliaments, 2 women chief ministers, 5 women ethnic affairs ministers, so well below the global average. So a way to go in terms of political representation. There's also the plural family law system, which has a lot of discriminatory laws against women, unfortunately, and violence against women is problematic in Myanmar. It's problematic in every country. It's problematic in Australia. But obviously active measures need to be taken to address this. I would make this point though. I've been working in Myanmar, or as you say, on different trainings over the last 5 years, and I've met with women all over the country, young women, older women, emerging leaders, established leaders, and there's a huge wealth of talent and ability here, and their voices, it's so important that their voices are heard. These women are the future of Myanmar in terms of gender equality. They are the people that will be able to map, a process by which gender equality can be achieved in Myanmar. So I really, I can't stress that enough, that the talent is there. The country just needs to make use of it. And in terms of where federalism is in Myanmar, I mean, I don't know again whether I'm best placed to answer that. Clearly, you don't yet have a federal country. The Constitution does not currently provide for a genuine federal state. So, I mean, in order for it to be a genuine federal state, the states and regions need to have a certain amount of power and responsibility, and at the moment it's not sufficient to say that Myanmar is federal. So I guess I guess as a country you have to decide if that's the best way forward for Myanmar, and I can't see any way of achieving that without significant change to the constitution and the way in which the allocation of powers is currently divided is not sufficient in my view.